welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. Let us talk about WWE A&E Biography's Kane. And you know what? I feel we talked about Kane a lot on this channel. Kane, like China, like Jake the Snake Roberts, these are stories that have been told in other things before. Like, they've done plenty of documentaries and things like that on Kane. So to me, going through the episode beat by beat really doesn't make much sense. So I'm only going to hit some of the highlights here and really focus on some things that maybe we didn't hear about and we didn't know that much about before. One, I didn't know Kane's parents were still alive. They look pretty spry for people who's got to be in their 80s by now. You know, his mom used to make all of his ring gear when he was first starting. Like, she made the Christmas creature outfit. If all of you who remembers the Christmas creature, she actually made that outfit when he was Angus. She made that outfit. I'm actually kind of surprised, but I'm not surprised. Like, that used to be a skill that people knew, like how to use a sewing machine. Like, it's like Bianca Belair can do magic now because she knows how to use a sewing machine in 2023. And it's a skill very few people actually know how to do. So I was very impressed to see his parents were still alive and that his mom was so integral in his career, even though they were not in favor of the pro wrestling thing. That, you know, they wanted him to play football. He wanted to play football, but, you know, he had, I think he said, torn his meniscus and ACL, and it was a career-ending injury. The second thing I noticed, Jim Cornette was not in this biography. I know that I think he had done parts on his podcast before about he was asked to be in it, but he disagreed with Kane's political positions, so he decided not to. And they talked about Smoky Mountain in here. And some of the things that they said, I kind of got, you know, a raised eyebrow over. You know, I was kind of like, So they did talk a lot about Unabomb. Al Snow was in here, to my surprise. They talked about his time as Unabomb, and where the idea came from. It came from the Unabomber. And it was an interesting scenario because this was something that Jim Cornette probably should have been in order to clear up some of the contradictions that was taking place in here. Because, and maybe it's not a contradiction if I think, because apparently what happened was at some point in the mid-90s, between 93 and 95, he worked with Undertaker. He worked with Undertaker in 95 at the Smoky Mountain Wrestling. I forget what the show was called. When Undertaker goes back to WWE, he puts in a good word for him. I think this gets him a tryout, which he says he didn't do very well in. And then later on, it was Jim Cornette who got his foot in the door. But this kind of conflicts with some other stories that I've heard about how Glenn, aka Kane, got into the WWE. I'm pretty sure when Jim Cornette does the review, he'll clear it up. But it's just something that kind of stuck out to me. That, you know, as we were telling the story of how he got to the WWE and how he ended up as Isaac Yankem, that a lot of it kind of leaves out Jim Cornette. And it would have been better if Jim Cornette would have been in this episode to tell the story, but we know how he is about that kind of stuff. Another interesting angle in here, and I think this is a very important angle, it's one of the things that kind of meanders through the story, is Kane's self-image and him feeling like he belongs in the locker room. And he talked about Isaac Yankem being something that held him back. You know, I think I even wrote down some quotes where he says that he felt ridiculous as Isaac Yankem and that it was campy and unrealistic. And he felt like the deck was stacked against him. Bret Hart, of course, says that he was one of his best students because he put together a match between him and Isaac Yankem. I think it was SummerSlam 95. And he felt that, you know, he had some potential, but he wasn't going anywhere with this gimmick. And it actually affected his in-ring career, as he had his match with Undertaker as Isaac Yankem and said that it was terrible. And he felt that as a job guy, of course, it was his job to make Undertaker look good. But because he had such a negative self-image as Isaac Yankem, that it didn't work out. And it affected his in-ring work, and he felt like he was, you know, not up to par. And This is at this point, Undertaker gives him the talk, where if he's gonna be in WWE, he needs to shape up and get his stuff together. Not in those terms, but I get it. And then they talked about the fake Diesel, which he says he gave him a lot more confidence. He said because the company was behind it. The company actually wanted to prove something when it came to the fake Diesel. And Kevin Nash was in here too, which was, really great. And Nash says, look, they wanted to prove that it was the machine, that the machine can make anybody, and that it wasn't us. But he also said that Glenn, Kane, learned big man pacing by watching me. And while he didn't say that, you can tell that he kind of did. Glenn kind of did learn how to work with confidence, how to have some swagger, because he was trying to play the role of Diesel. And that was Diesel's gimmick, Big Daddy Cool. And so he was trying to fit into that. And that allowed him to loosen up. And because the company actually supported the fake Diesel, which made no sense for them to actually support that it was working out. Now we know, obviously, rip-offs of anybody are not going to work. It'll never work. In long term, short term, it never work. They gave Kane a lot of credit for trying very hard in the Diesel character. Kane said that there was plans for them to be the tag team champions, him and the fake Razor. I'm glad that went nowhere. It was an embarrassment, and the least we say about it, the better. But I did like that they talked about this odd gimmick, which is something you would think would be embarrassing, was something that actually gave him confidence. So now he feels like he belongs again because, the company is behind the fake gimmick. He's getting a decent push. He's winning. I think he was like one of the final 4 guys in the Royal Rumble that one year. What was it, 96? The company is actually moving forward with this fake Diesel thing, even though it makes no sense to do so. But I think it was also, and this is just me theorizing, they're trying to do the intellectual property game where these are just characters like Captain America, like Spider-Man, where anybody can play these characters if they decided, they wanted to. And it didn't work out, did it? So I guess they learned hard. They continued to keep doing it, didn't they? They had a fake Kane, fake Sin Cara. I mean, they will never learn. It's like you already proved it with the 2 Undertakers that you could just do. You could put somebody in a costume and have them mimic the movements. Like we've already seen that before. And it seems like every few years they want to remind people, hey, this gimmick, we could just put anybody in the gimmick. And it's like, no, it doesn't, wrestling doesn't work like Hollywood. People can deal with different James Bonds from different generations. Nobody wants a different generation Undertaker or a different generation Kane. We want to see you evolve the character that exists, not try to create something new, or put somebody new under the hood. That doesn't make sense. And that was stupid for the company to even try it. And that's one of the many missteps when it comes to WWE and their never-ending pursuit of proving that they have intellectual property control over the characters, which is stupid. Now, I did stumble across an article by Vince Russo where he basically put it all on Bruce. So this is from a WrestleCrap article that Vince Russo did, where and I'm going to just basically cut through it a little bit. Kevin and Scott are going to WCW. That he told me, he being Bruce Pritchard. Obviously, he was talking about Scott Hall and Kevin Nash joining our competitor. Now, as I was taught early on, no talent was ever bigger than the company. Wrestlers came and went, and the WWF went on. So, okay, big loss, but we'll be all right. This time it was different. Bruce told me that Vince was really concerned about losing Hall and Nash. I guess perhaps the reasoning being that it was the 2 top talents leaving at the same time, not just one. With the boss concerned, I could see that Bruce was concerned. Honestly, I don't think Bruce would have been concerned if Vince wasn't. Bruce's philosophy was always that any talent was replaceable. But with Bruce, if Vince is concerned, then he's concerned. It was just about a week later that I got back together with Bruce. As usual, we went over the magazine business first. Then he would give me the future plans for various WWF talents. That's when I first learned about the fake Razor and the fake Diesel. I remember Bruce laying all this out to me. He's attempted to be extremely convincing because there was a look of dumbfoundedness on my face that I could not hide. And then, of course, he goes into the idea of the characters and that the characters are over, not the guys. And, of course, Vince Russo disagreed. But that was a very interesting piece of business, this fake Diesel and fake Razor thing, in order to prove they owned the characters, which they do. I mean, come on. They do. Now, interestingly enough, the part about the creation of Kane, now that is the part that really kind of trips me up, because there have been a lot of people over the years that have tried to take a modicum of credit for Kane and Kane's creation. So the interesting bit is why Kane was even necessary. So a lot of people kind of forget when they discuss Vader in the WWF. They blame that Shawn Michaels is the one who took Vader and threw him in the wind, that Shawn disrespected Vader, showed that Vader was kind of soft, disrespected Vader in front of the boys and all this kind of stuff, which he did. But they forget that Vader slapped a reporter in Kuwait. And I had forgotten about it too. I completely forgot about Vader in Kuwait. So what occurred, for people who may not know, is that Undertaker, as a champion, was sitting there with Vader. They were being interviewed by a guy in Kuwait. They were doing, I think it might have been the Kuwaiti Cup. They did this a couple of years in the New Generation era. So like 96, 97, they had done these Kuwaiti tours where they would go over to the Middle East. Similar to how they do Saudi Arabia today, right? And during one of these interviews, the reporter started asking if wrestling was fake. Undertaker wanted to give him a more intellectual response, while Vader got offended. And Vader grabs the guy. I think he even slapped him. Now, this whole ordeal, according to Bruce Prichard and Vader, it was all set up. That a producer was basically told them that the question was coming, that they were going to be asked about wrestling being fake, and that they were to sort of intimidate the interviewer. But the interviewer wouldn't know that they were going to get any closer to him. So when Vader got closer to the guy, he got scared, and then Vader, of course, went a little further than everybody intended. So Bruce kind of felt like, okay, Vader went too far. I think something to wrestle. Bruce says that, he told him not to cuss and to, basically let Undertaker handle the question. But Vader, of course, went overboard. Now, the fallout of this is that Vader was sort of locked down in Kuwait for between 10 and 14 days. He was on house arrest. So it was terrible it was great for his image, similar to Dr. D. David Schultz. It was great for his image that he would go ahead and put his hands on an interviewer who asked him that wrestling was fake. But it was terrible for the creative, and it was terrible for the company because it was bad public relations. In fact, it was so bad that I see in an article from The Sun that it says, quote, wrestling was officially banned from Kuwait following this event for over 10 years. And there wouldn't be another event there until East Wrestling Championship promoted cards in February 2009. And then later, the Othman guy, who was the interviewer, attempted to sue WWE for $1 million after the company used the footage of Vader's assault during its shows. So Vader pretty much took himself out of the pool. Now this was in '97, of course, which would have been about a year after Vader was supposed to be world champion and was kind of kicked around by Shawn Michaels. But his career wasn't completely in the toilet until after this event. After this thing in Kuwait, it was over for Vader. And what year did Kane become created? In 1997. So now we have this situation where we need an opponent for Undertaker throughout the fall. And people are pitching ideas for what, Kane, what could it be? What could this opponent be, for Undertaker? And Bruce Prichard in the biography, takes a lot of credit for the creation of Kane and where Kane came from. And of course, Jim Cornette is like, there's elements of Unabomb in Kane, because of the black, the red and black character. If you saw pictures of Unabomb, you see that Unabomb wore red and black. So Kane is wearing red and black. So that led people to think that Unabomb was sort of the precursor to Kane and was created by Jim Cornette, which he was not. Now, whether Vince Russo had anything to do with this is unknown. But in terms of where the biography, Bruce Pritchard has taken a lot of the credit. Now, despite the fact that Vince McMahon has a different view of Kane, it's a more psychological view of Kane. He sees Kane as sort of a twisted superhero. That's where you see the sketch artwork with the cape and all that kind of stuff. While Jim Cornette came up with the monster movie concept. He talked about this in various interviews. Would have been nice for him to talk about it here. But he's talking about, his favorite horror movies are, Michael Myers and all that kind of stuff, which, of course, informs Kane's idea of how this character should be. So Glenn is getting his ideas for what the character should be from Jim Cornette. And it's not mentioned in here because it's basically just Bruce Pritchard and Glenn Jacobs basically saying, oh, yeah, this is kind of how we came up with it. But there was other people involved. It was a creative team. Anyway, I really like that. But this is the part of this is that this is where Glenn finally feels like he made it. All of the tough situation that he had gone through the last 2 years in the WWF, from being Fake Diesel to being Isaac Yankem, he feels like he was finally being utilized correctly. That they finally had found something for him that was beneficial to him in his career. And of course, this led to the tremendous run that Kane would go on, him becoming a marketing phenomenon, which I honestly forgot. In the biography, he talked a lot about him being on The Weakest Link, him doing Chef Boyardee commercials, stuff like that, which, of course, is an exposure of the character to the point where, of course, the character had already been exposed by that point, so you can't do too much. Now, by exposed, I mean the character is talking, he's dancing and doing all this kind of weird stuff when he starts doing these commercials. So it's not like he's 1997 Michael Myers is doing Chef Boyardee commercials. So, but I also thought it was very interesting. They talked about unmasking Kane. Now, this was an interesting bit because they had other wrestlers like Sheamus and Drew McIntyre and other people talk about how much they did not like the unmasking of Kane. Now, I wasn't watching wrestling when they unmasked Kane. I came back, Kane was already unmasked. And I was just kind of like, I assumed they built up to a pay-per-view match where Kane lost his mask. That's what I assumed because, even back then, I knew a little bit about wrestling. It turns out that they did it on Raw. And I was like, I didn't like that. But I did like that Kane was unmasked. It breathed new life into the character. From the biography, you learn that the only two people who were in support of Kane losing his mask was Vince McMahon and Glenn Jacobs, the guy who was playing Kane. Now, apparently they wanted to debut Kane with a bald head. And so they started shaving his head. And at that point, I think it was Bruce that they said stopped him while his head was half shaved and said, leave it like that. That creepy half shaved at the top thing that he had going on there. Leave it like that because he wanted Kane to look like a freak. Interestingly enough, his wife was in the biography too and talked about the practicality of Kane having half his head shaved and she has to go to public plays and out in public with this guy who is her husband. And they got to go in public with him having half his head shaved like this. And she hated it. But it was great for the character. And I think it did, add new life to the Kane character. I think it was a big missed opportunity that they did not push Kane harder at that point in time. That him not just skyrocketing up the ladder and becoming world champion and everything, which, you know, you would think would have happened, is he would have gotten a similar or the same push that he got initially, that it would have started a new thing with Kane. Now it kind of did, but he was still like not winning. He was getting disqualified a lot, and he was still working with like top guys. Like I think he worked with Shawn Michaels around that time. He worked with Chris Benoit around that time, but he wasn't winning. You know, he was dominating and destroying certain guys, but he still had that mid-card Kane ceiling. And it wasn't until several years later where they reinvented Kane again as the devil's favorite demon, and he actually finally got back to the top, which it was, what, 6 years after the fact? 6 years after he was unmasked. So, but I did like the unmasking of Kane. I'm one of the few people who actually do like it. I think that unmasking a guy adds another dimension to the character, because it's one thing from a guy to never have a mask and now he's got one, to him never having one and now he's losing it. And then you talk about the psychological effects of him losing it. That's very important as far as I'm concerned. But they didn't talk a lot about him being the mayor, which is fine by me because I didn't care about that. But these are just some of the interesting bits I thought from the biography. Did you guys watch it? What did you think? Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.
MagMongoSlade. Best house I ever drew, Daddy.